Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Make It Mine podcast. So, I know I always say that I'm super excited about my guests, but today it's kind of a different level. Holly, welcome, Holly. It's so good to have you here.
Hey, I know. It's
Holly,
funny, we've known each other for, oh, sorry. I'm sorry. You go.
no, it's just so awesome. Yeah, like just since the very, very beginning of time, I think Holly, your blog, this is Holly Glenn Whitaker, founder of Hip Sobriety. And if you haven't gone to hipsobriety.com and read her writing, it gives me chills. It's some of the best on the internet. I mean, truly phenomenal. And your blog was one of the first things I ever read. And then out of the blue, I was on my phone one night in bed, just feeling like uncertain about everything. I put this book into the world. I didn't know what I was doing. And you messaged me and you said, "Hey, I love your book." And I probably could have fallen out of my bed. Like, I was like, you love my book? Oh my God. Like, life is complete. It was amazing. But thank you for being
Well,
here.
I remember that exchange because I got your book. It was 2015. It was like, it came out October 2015.
Yep.
And I was like, I had just left San Francisco. I was living with my mom. And I remember Laura had forwarded it to me. And it was just like the first time because I stopped drinking because of Alan Carr's book. And I was like, oh my God, this is like an American woman writing writing these principles, these concepts, and backing it up with science. And it was just, I mean, it was fantastic. And then you said you knew who I was, and I was like, oh my God, you know who I mean, it was total.
It was awesome. We were like had a crush on each other.
Yeah, I know, and we've been friends since then, since 2015. I mean, you came on the show pretty early, but we started talking soon thereafter. So yeah, it's an honor to be here. I'm excited.
So
I
cool.
listen to your podcast. I don't listen to many podcasts. I don't listen to my own podcast. I love your podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love your podcast. I do listen to your podcast. Holly and Laura have the podcast Home. So just HOME. It's awesome. It's phenomenal. So if you haven't listened to that yet. But Holly, so what I wanted to do with you is just have you take us back and just tell sort of your story from the beginning. Like, where were you and what was life like when you were kind of still caught up in it all?
Yeah, I'm writing a book right now, and so I've been kind of going back through all of that because it seems like so long ago. I went to go see Gabby Bernstein talk last night. I saw her talk for the first time in January 2013 when I was trying to quit drinking. And it was just such a like full circle moment, from where I was to where I am now. But yeah, my story is I started drinking when I was 15. I never had like a terribly off the rails relationship with it. I drank, I binge drank. I was in that like 30% pool of people that are excessive binge drinkers. And I thought it was this necessary part of life, or I think we all do. We're supposed to be able to tolerate this thing. And I had, in 2010, I broke up with the person I thought I was going to marry. And that was a shock to the system. I threw myself into my work. I got in a relationship with someone that was above me at work. And when I lost this like anchoring thing, this anchoring hope, I was 30. I lost this anchoring hope that I was going to have a family. And I just threw myself into the one thing I was really good at, which was, my profession, my career. And when I started dating somebody that I was, that was involved in that whole work thing. And I lost myself. I had lost myself from a really young age. I had never felt comfortable in my skin. I'd had an eating disorder since I was very young. And, but it was this period of time where I just had this, I had unhealthy coping mechanisms, and I just didn't know what the fucking point. Oh, sorry. Can I cuss on this?
Yeah,
sorry.
of course.
I didn't know what the point of. I don't know anymore. I didn't know what the point was of life. I didn't understand why I was here, and I just thought I was going through the motions. And for me, it was just the idea of like I was looking for. I mean, my drinking got so out of control because I was working nonstop. I mean, all I did was work, and I I would come home and I would drink, well, in the evenings, and smoke pot and smoke spliffs in the evenings. And I would do that until I couldn't turn myself off. I didn't know how to stop, like, the chaos. And I would do that until I incapacitated myself, and then I would go to sleep, and I'd wake up and I'd start over. And it was this very sick, stuck Groundhog Day, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to get out of it. And for me, it was, I went to Costa Rica in 2012, in the summer of 2012, and I just remember it was in Bocas del Toro in Panama, and I remember running into this girl that was from Texas that had, like, fled and, like, lived on an island and had kids with a guy from Panama. And I was like, that's the way out, like, just stay here. And like, I was looking for outs, and I was getting sicker and sicker. My drinking was it was everything. It was my eating disorder, my drinking, my pot. I was severely addicted to pot. I had shopping stuff. I was, like, 6 figures in debt. It was just like a shit show. And I didn't know how to stop it and how to get out of it. And I had this moment in 2012 where I hit, I had this very, like, quintessential moment, like, where I hit my knees and was just like, please make this stop. I was in such pain, and I didn't know how to stop it and how to get out of it. And a lot of that is also because I didn't know how to keep my life and get out of it. It's like, I didn't know how, like, there was too much to, like, how do you give this up? Like, it felt like if I were to actually, get rid of the things that were killing me, I would have to also get rid of my life. And, like, it's just this whole thing that you don't know how to get yourself out of. And I had this moment where I woke up and I was so sick, and I screamed for help. And then a couple days later, I was in a conversation with a friend of mine. I worked in healthcare, and I had a lot of friends that were doctors, and we were just having this random conversation while I was babysitting his kids. He was about to leave, and he tells me something about a man we know in common. And he mentions something, borderline personality disorder comes up, and I go online and I take this quiz about, whether or not I have borderline personality disorder. Like, the hair stood up on my neck. It's just like, I knew that there was something in those words. Like, it was just, there was a charge there and, like, a key. And when I took this quiz, I was like 8 out of 9 for the markers for borderline personality disorder, which I didn't have. It's just borderline. Like, borderline personality disorder mimics a lot of the stuff that addiction, fuels, and so behaviors addiction fuels. And so, but it was just this and that was when I started reading Alan Carr's book, The Easy Way to Control Alcohol. And I had this, over the next 2 weeks, I read it, furiously. And then I had, a weekend event where I was out with a friend, and I was, 32, 33. And it was just like, I can't do that. Like, this is no way to live. And reading Alan's book, which is, similar to yours, but not exactly, but it has a lot of the same concepts, which is like, this is ridiculous. Like, the only way to, like you say, like, you have as much as you want to drink. You don't, you don't want to drink, and like, for me, I never thought I would be able to get back to that point where I was before I stopped. I just thought, like, if I had only known when I started drinking what I would have to keep up. Mm-hmm. And there's no way out of this. There's no way to get back to that place because I know too much. And and drinking is I'm so invested in this life that, I lived in San Francisco, all my relationships, all of my social, all my work, all my, everything involved alcohol. And I just didn't know how to stop it. And there was such a mind shift from that. And I went to a wedding, and I had gone out the night. I went home to my hometown to a wedding, and I'd been out the night before, and I was red and bloated. And I ran into this guy that that was a guy that I had a thing with in high school. And, I looked like shit, and I felt like shit. And I was drinking, it was hot, I was hungover. And, like when you when you're hungover and you have that like bloated, like the edema from it and like the red, like I was very, like alcohol would affect me. And I remember drinking wine and getting hot from it immediately, and like having the red flush and feeling, fat and disgusting and so sick of it. And so I finished the book on the way back to San Francisco, and I just had this like major, by the time I got off the train in San Francisco, it was a Monday, I want to say. And I drank during a work day. I was like on my way back to the city. I had my last drink on a train, and and that night we had a work event, and I showed up back to San Francisco, and I was just like, I'm done with this. And it was, I mean, there was such a mind shift in it that I was done with it. I just was like, I don't have to do this. I went out that night and I did all the things Ellen Carr says, which is like, go out to the social event and like prove that, and like, and it was so liberating to go and watch everyone get shit faced and to drink, a ton of Diet Coke and to tell people, yeah, I'm not going to drink anymore, and to watch reactions, because you don't realize how many people have the same painful relationship with alcohol, even though on the outside it doesn't look like they do. When people are like, wait a minute, you're just doing that, that's a thing. It was so eye-opening. And I skipped home. I called my mom and I was like, I didn't drink tonight and it was great, and I'm not going to drink anymore. And and that lasted for 2 months, and I drank again, and then I had to go through the motions of a severe recovery. I mean, I invested my life into recovering from alcohol addiction and pot addiction and food addiction. And, I mean, it was, but that first key point was just this realization that your work is, you so eloquently and profoundly, uncovering your work, which is that we don't need this. Like, we don't actually have to do this thing.
It's so cool because your story, 2 months and just cold turkey, and you were super happy, you were elated, you were thrilled, I don't think, did you have many withdrawal symptoms or anything?
No, I didn't. I mean, there were nights that I went out and I had a shitty night, because it was like walking through my life and everyone, you know what I mean? Like, I remember I was trying to prove something to myself, which was that I could still go out and have fun and not drink. But like Alan Carr says, like, like it uncovers what you were drinking to make fun. That's just really boring. Right. And so like that was a little painful, like going out and I would stay out till 3, and I was like, oh my God, I can stay out till 3 with everybody. But I was like, oh, I don't like these people, and this isn't fun. Yeah. And I found an inner world that I had, that I had forgotten. I also I found like, I mean, I don't know. It was, it like all of this stuff. I mean, alcohol is a numbing agent, and it helps us to escape and manage our lives. It serves a purpose. Like, we don't use it. We're not stupid for using it. We're incredibly intelligent for using a tool that we think works without really realizing all the consequences on the back end of it. And what I found was when I removed it, I just was faced and left with all of my, like I had stopped processing stuff. I had stopped processing pain. I had stopped processing so many different levels of my life, and that came full force. And that was, that was like, that's the work, right? As you remove this thing that's like stunting you and keeping you from experiencing, life. But I mean, my life started, like, that was when my life started. Like, I don't remember I don't know how I made it through that long living the way I was living.
And I think that's what's so cool about your work is that so then you've made this your life's work, and your work, what is so amazing about it is like, yeah, sure, there's the alcohol component. There's the fact, it's addictive, whatever, but that can be relatively easy to shift your thinking about. Boom, all of a sudden you're faced with you've been using this one coping tool, or maybe a few with, pot and alcohol and whatever else, but then all of a sudden you're there in the middle of it. And you don't have those tools. And by the way, you haven't been able to, you haven't just learned the skills to just manage life in all of life's ups and downs and emotions and thoughts and everything else. And so your work, I think, is so profound and important because your school helps people learn those skills, starts from, okay, then what can this look like? Like, how can I do this without my numbing agent? Because I think that's what happens is you quit, and that's great and it's amazing, but then all of a sudden there's something to numb and you don't know how to do it. You don't know how to get through it. You don't know how to face it.
Yeah. Well, you have to grow up and you have to do all these things that you've never had to do without alcohol. I mean, like just like having, we had that one talk that one time, for something that we did where it was, about having sex for the first time. Like I hadn't gone on dates without using alcohol, there's the part of it where you have to learn how to get through life without this to do these things that you didn't think you could do, it's such a dynamic process. And like somebody was asking the other day about how, just like how somebody asked her why she wasn't drinking, and she went out with an old drinking buddy, and he was, and the first couple times she denied a drink, it was fine. And then the third time and the fourth time, he was like, finally, just like, tell me about this. Why are you not drinking? And she felt like she owed him a story. And we were just even that simple, like just even that like small event where she was in a situation with somebody where she felt she owed him a story. And we were talking about it, and I was just like, the beauty of this is you start to learn like the depths of your boundaries, and the depths of how you can, like, that you have authority over your life, that you can actually tell people, I'm not going to tell you that. Like, you can actually create, like, you don't have to actually, like, you allow yourself, by giving yourself this like access to these deeper parts of yourself, you get through life by doing things that most people don't have to do, right? Like, you get to experience these things, and I don't experience that anymore. Nobody, I've not been in a situation where somebody asked me something I didn't want to tell them, and I felt compelled to tell them in a really long time. And that's because, it removed this thing that was keeping me stuck in a really weak pattern. This is like, anyway, yeah.
Wow, it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool. So then, you started doing some of the work to really, deal with and face life. And what did that look like? Like, what were some of the main things that you used? What were some of your main tools?
Yeah, when I started drinking again in December of 2012, after I thought I'd quit, and then I was like, oh, I'm just going to drink at this one thing. And, part of the work is like, not questioning whether or not you made the right decision about it. We get really, messed up by cognitive dissonance around this. And I got back into that place of cognitive dissonance. And so for me, it was just, and it was very defeating to when you start drinking again after you've stopped. It's a very scary thing. And so I started working just on the things that were, the stuff that lies underneath, right? Like the root cause of why we have to reach outside of ourselves. And one of the first things I did was I read this book called May Cause Miracles by Gabby Bernstein. And that landed on New Year's Day of 2013. And I started to do like repattern my relationship. I started to actually stare my fear in its face. I started to do a fear inventory and figure out the stuff that was really creeping me out and keeping me stuck. And that was some of the work that led me to A Course in Miracles. So there was like a spiritual component to this. Like, I started going to church. I started to there was a reconnection to this deeper part of me that I had cut off for so long, right? And so that was part of it. I also started a meditation practice. I started with guided meditations, but I started doing Kundalini in late January of 2013. I was hungover in New York City, and I found a Kundalini class, and that was from the moment I went, it changed everything. And I started practicing that daily. And Kundalini is a very dynamic yoga and meditation practice that like helps you to like balance out it changed everything for me. I signed up to become an instructor. So that was one. I started going to a therapist. I threw the book at it. I had been sick and miserable for long enough, and I just wasn't going to settle for that anymore. And I would have done, and I did do anything to take me out of that. And I wanted to stop drinking. Like, it was funny because I was terrified that, prior to, reading Alan's work, I was terrified to quit drinking. I bought his book because it's called The Easy Way to Control Alcohol. And I was like, I just need to control it better, and then I got to this point where I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this thing. And that wanting, that desire, of like just, and having that taste of freedom, of being able to like live your life and not have to, think about, all of like, am I going to drink tonight? Am I not going to drink tonight? Am I going to drink this weekend? How much did I drink? Did I say something stupid when I drank? Did it, like, what is drinking doing to me? Like, do I have an addiction to drinking? And all the stuff that comes with it, like having that freedom from it was so liberating. And I wanted so desperately to not drink. I really did. And so it was just, I threw the book at it. I was just like, when my friends were out, being normal 30-something-year-olds or, getting married or having kids or doing, that stuff, I was at home in my studio apartment, listening to like, spa music and chanting music and, wrapping turbans around my head and chanting and like reading the Bible. And like, I did everything that I could in my power to just to not be sick anymore.
That's so awesome.
I literally did, hundreds of things to change it and to shift it, to fix it.
And then you put it all together into this amazing school that you have taken thousands of people through now?
We've got about, I think 1,200 people have been through it at this point.
That's
so yeah.
So amazing. So amazing. And so you really took everything that you learned, because I think you're very much like me, where you see a problem, you're like, I'm going to learn everything about this problem. And then I'm going to take all this information and synthesize it so that the next person doesn't have to learn everything, but they can just know the important things.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was so alone in what I was going through. The only two people I knew when I stopped drinking were men, and they were men that had used AA, and they were very different than I was. And I tried AA, but it was not for me. And there was something, I also worked in healthcare, and I also was in, not only did I work in healthcare, my job was I was a director of revenue cycle management, and which meant I was reading insurance contracts and figuring out like the future of healthcare and how physicians are going to get paid. And it was just, what I saw was a future where what I saw was a system that systematically missed people like me and was unable to treat people like me. And that was what my profession was I felt like I was in a system that would never help someone like me. And I was also, so it was just like professionally, it was just I couldn't use healthcare to help myself when I was almost dying. Like it was just such a black and white thing. Like my insurance card does not work. It barely worked for a shitty therapist. I had one I found a therapist in network that I had to go out of network to like actually use, to find a good therapist that could deal with me. And so it was just this horrific realization that what I was building and investing all of my time in, was set up in a way where women like me wouldn't actually get help. And that the resources that were set in motion to help me, first of all, they promoted anonymity and they promoted labeling and all sorts of things that didn't feel good for me. And kept me from finding other people. And not only that, like beyond that, I lived in San Francisco, and I was like, I used to go to this place called The Melt because I loved like the customer experience I would get and how I would, and I loved going to coffee. Like I'd paid so much money for experience, and here I was, and my experience in this process was just crap. It was just like the bottom of the barrel. Like you're dying and you're referred out to, to systems that either you can't afford, or what is free, is not really designed to inspire, you can find inspiration in the rooms for sure. But like the experience of it is you go down in the basement, And so for me, it was just there was such a conflict of like what existed and what I wanted. And I never wanted somebody like me, like to go through. I didn't want the next girl to go through what I went through by herself. And not only that, there was just such obvious things that worked, like the repatterning of our subconscious. Like that, why weren't we talking about that, and like the fact that like, using like sound therapy and acupuncture and like all of these things that I had found so many things. I'd researched the hell out of it. And so the school came about by I left my job, and I just wanted to figure out how I could actually like systematically teach people, how I could codify what it had worked for me. And I did that by discovering I couldn't figure out how it had worked. And then, John Dupuis' work, Integral Recovery, like he took, Integral Life Practice, which is like a derivative of Ken Wilber's, integral theory, and had taken Integral Life Practice and and basically, appropriated it for recovery. And then when I read his book in 2014, I was like, oh, like this is what happened to me. I did something that was holistic, versus, like typically, like just reading Alan Carr's book wasn't holistic. Just, going to AA wasn't holistic. I had somehow managed to like expose myself to a holistic way to heal myself. And it worked because I was addressing every aspect of my life.
Oh, that's so awesome.
So yes, that's what the school is.
So since we're on the school, if people are interested, where can they find the school?
Right now, I mean, we're in the middle of doing all sorts of stuff but right now they can just go to Hip Sobriety School, the hipsobrietyproject.com, or they can go to my website, hipsobriety.com, and there's actually like a tab for school. But yeah, we're in a process. Like it has been a small operation that I've done 3 times a year for the last couple of years, with a limited number of students, and it's now something that we're expanding and that we're, so there's a lot of cool stuff that's coming up for it. But right now it still can be found at hipsobriety.com.
Well, it gives me chills. Like I'm so excited about the expansion and everything. I mean, it's just awesome. Your work is so important. I have so many people who, they find us together one way or another, and then they tell me stories about your school and what they did through it and how it was the missing piece. And I mean, it's just so inspiring. All right, I have 2 more questions for you.
Your school is your book is the number 1 recommended reading in the school.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Like literally.
That's so cool.
It's number 1.
Okay, 2 more questions for you. First of all, one of your favorite blog posts is "I'm not an alcoholic because nobody," or one of my favorite blog posts of yours is "I'm not an alcoholic because nobody is." And can you just talk about that a little bit? Like when you wrote that, I mean, it's such a beautiful piece of writing that I just love, and it gave me so much hope. And yeah, I'd love to just hear it from you.
Yeah, I mean, that was like one of the things, that was one of the hardest realizations to come to. I mean, when I read, Alan's book, I was just like, oh, like we have this like this binary view of what a drinking problem is. You're either an alcoholic or you're a normal drinker, and the spectrum of normal drinker, like includes people that are addicted. And so it's just, there is this like binary thing, and what it's so it was such a stumbling block for me. Like if I had known that I could have a drinking problem, years and years ago, that wasn't normal. We've normalized, problematic drug use. Because we've normalized drug use. Alcohol is a normal, it's a drug. It's one of the most dangerous drugs, and it's normalized. And not only normalized, it's promoted. Like we think it's just so normal to drink. And I ended up taking on, when I stopped drinking the second time, I did identify as an alcoholic, and it never felt good. And I ended up ditching the label. And I think there was just, for me, it was such there's so much, and like this 5 years ago, a lot has changed in 5 years, like a lot has changed in 5 years. 5 years ago, there was the only people that were talking about the fact that maybe nobody should be drinking was, like Jason Vale and Craig Beck and Alan Carr, like I think all 3 white English dudes. And it was just I wrote it because I felt that, this is before I read your book. I wrote it because there was just, nobody was saying it. And it was, I got shit for that. I mean, if you can imagine, the kind of letters I got for that. And, some people really love the label alcoholic, and they really fight for that label. And to each our own in this, but like, I put it out there because I wanted people to consider that, remove that noise for just a second. Can we remove that polarization, and can we actually talk about what's really happening? Like what is really happening with our relationship with alcohol? Because we're not doing that. We're not actually having an honest conversation about our own drug use, right? We're shipping it off, and we're giving it to a group of people who will do the work and who will identify, like who have done the work and are willing to do that. And by doing that, what we're doing is basically setting up a society where we don't address, the fourth leading cause of preventable death, until people are, have multiple DUIs or like the qualifiers for this. Like people are falling off the cliff and then getting help. And we're not looking at this where it really needs to be looked at, which is at the beginning of it, right? Which is at the beginning of it. And all of us should be able to have a conversation about our drug use, right? We should be able to have a conversation without the fucking label and without the stigma and without the fear. But we can't do that because there's so much baggage wrapped up into that. And not only for people that are in AA, but for everybody, because AA has been it has been the way that we understand addiction in America. I did not need to go to an AA meeting to understand what an alcoholic was through my own mind. It's portrayed to us. It's fed to us. And we all live by this code. And so it's just kind of removing the noise so we can have the conversation about what's actually happening.
One of the things in that article that I loved is you compare it to we are doing the same thing to people who need help with their drinking. We're almost necessitating this rock bottom, but we're doing the same thing as if you were having problems with, you're obese and you walked into a doctor's office and they said, well, we can't really do anything for you. You got to come back when you need kind of bypass surgery or you need your And
are you waiting for until you have a heart attack before you start addressing any sort of heart issues? We're waiting. There's no concept of pre-addiction. We're waiting until people are sick as sick can be before we actually offer them any sort of help with it. And I mean, I've talked to how many, thousands of people at this point. I know what happens. In therapy offices, I have, clients of mine who've had therapists convince them that they don't have a drinking problem when they're self-selecting and saying something's not right here. No. And doctors do that as well. And it's just this thing that we're not willing to, I'm willing to say, do what you want to do. I believe in decriminalization. I believe in legalization of all substances. I'm not a prohibitionist. Do what you're going to do, but at least do it with the knowing fact that this is actually something that it's a poison. It's a neurotoxin. It's a, and at least let's talk about that. We need to be drinking like we need to be smoking cigarettes, that's how I feel.
Well, I think if you were going to go jump out of an airplane, you would have a conversation about your parachute and make sure it was, but we do this thing. And I know I did it for years and years and years without any knowledge of the fact. I literally did not realize alcohol was addictive. I didn't think that I could become addicted to it because I knew people were alcoholics. And I was actually told by someone who told me she was an alcoholic that I wasn't one. And so
yeah, I remember that.
It didn't matter how much pain I was in.
5 years, right?
5 years.
5 years before you stopped drinking, one of your friends said, oh, no, you're not an alcoholic. When you were willing to have that conversation. And because of that, right?
Yep. I was like, well, what about me? Because she got sober with AA and I was like, we drink together. It's the same. And just, no, it's not the same. I'm different. I was born this way. And just really quickly, because I think you're going to appreciate this, but one of the things I refer to a lot because it's what we have, right? We have the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. This is the actual definition of the disorder, and it's called alcohol use disorder, and these are the 11 questions, blah, 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 blah. And one of the things that I've said it before, but I find absolutely fascinating about is that 2 of the 11 questions are these. Do you need to drink more than you used to get the same effect? And have you had moments when you have drank more than you intended? And if you look at everybody, everybody fits that kind of mild there. So just to bring it into okay, this isn't just Holly's opinion that, there isn't this dichotomy. This is the reality that according to our, huge diagnostic manual, there isn't this dichotomy. And I had said that, interesting, and this is just to say how deep this is, how deep this stuff is ingrained. I had said that on a podcast or something, and one of the comments below is so alcohol use disorder, AUD, he's like, AUD is bullshit. It's actually alcoholic using denial. So basically saying that the entire, statistical manual is crap and no, I'm just an alcoholic and I'm just denying my problem. And so, whatever, I'm not going to get upset about that, but it just shows you how entrenched this idea
Yeah.
is, right? It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I went to a dinner the other night, a mental health dinner, and it was put on by a group, like a group of functional medicine doctors, like doctors that actually, do you understand, what functional medicine
Yeah.
is? Yeah. And I walked in, and one of the doctors who was hosting it offered me a glass of wine. She was like, "Do you want something to drink?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll have a glass of water." And she goes, "Oh," like she was like, she made some quip about like how like I was warming up to drink my wine. And everyone was drinking there. And like this is in San Francisco at a mental health dinner, a dinner like focused on talking about mental health. And she's a functional medicine doctor, and she's drinking, and she makes some thing because she can't imagine that I don't drink. And I said, "Oh, I don't drink." And she goes, "Oh, okay." Like, and it was just like I think like one of the things I think is so interesting is people that are listening to this, most likely, like we've been indoctrinated into this like other way of thinking, and what we don't realize, what I forget so often when I go out into the real world, because like most of my friends don't drink, or they're so, or like whatever, is that we are so outdated in our understanding, our like of what it is, and anyway. Sorry. Okay, last question.
Last question. Yeah, I've kept you on a long time, but my last question, I ask it. What would you tell Holly of, I don't know what year it was, the 2010, 2012, the Holly that was stuck, about what life is like on the other side?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, that's so like I'd tell her so much. I think I would probably tell her that she had to go through what she had to go through, and I think like that's one of the most important things that like to understand. There's so much regret and so much like I would say like there can be, and I have no regret. But I would say like you have to kind of go through this to get to the other side, and like meaning whatever we have to go through, whatever that is that we have to go through to arrive at the point where we can actually have an honest conversation about it. But I would, I would tell her like one of my favorite things is a quote by Mastin Kipp, which is live the way other people won't, so you can live the way other people can't. And I just tell her, you do this one thing and you can have everything you want. Like you learn how to do this and the world is yours. Right. And that's, and that's proven itself true.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. Well, thank you so much, Holly. Thank you for coming on, and such a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, I love talking to you. I can talk to you forever.
Me too. I know. Too short. Always too short. All right. Have a great day.
You too.
This has been Annie Grace with This Naked Mind podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more at thisnakedmind.com. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, as it really helps us spread the word.